I've always been into old-school tech. There's something comforting about the crackle of vinyl, the soft hum of a CRT television, and the whir of a VHS rewinding. So when I came across a stack of VHS tapes at a flea market last weekend, I couldn't resist. The vendor, an old man with deep wrinkles and tired eyes, barely acknowledged me as I rummaged through the pile. Most of them were old movies and cartoons, but one tape stood out. It was unmarked, just a plain black VHS with no label, no title, nothing. A little scuffed, but otherwise in good shape. I asked the vendor about it, and he just shrugged. Came from an estate sale. Take it if you want. No charge. I wasn't about to turn down a free mystery. That night, after dinner, I popped the tape into my old VCR and settled in, expecting some forgotten home video or maybe a bootlegged TV recording. The screen flickered with static for a few seconds before fading into a grainy, flickering image. It was a home video shot on an old camcorder. The footage was of a living room, warmly lit, with a couch, a coffee table, and a fireplace. Something about the place seemed oddly familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. A woman sat on the couch with a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, reading her a story. The girl giggled, curling up beside her mother. A man entered the frame, carrying a tray with hot cocoa. It was such a normal, cozy family scene, until it wasn't. The little girl's expression changed. Her eyes flicked towards something off camera, and her smile faltered. The woman, her mother, followed her gaze, and her face darkened. The man, noticing their expressions, turned toward the same spot. The camera panned slightly, as if whoever was filming had noticed too. The far end of the room had a hallway, dimly lit. At first, it seemed empty, but then I saw it, a shadow. Not a person, not an object, just a patch of darkness that seemed deeper than the rest of the room. It stretched unnaturally, spilling across the floor like ink, shifting as if it were alive. The girl whispered something to her mother, and the woman wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. The man stood up slowly, his body tense. The shadow didn't move like a normal shadow. It almost pulsed, like it was breathing. The tape crackled with static, distorting the image, but through the interference I could swear I heard a whisper. Low, indistinct. The man took a step toward the hallway, and the whispering grew louder. The woman called out to him, her voice shaking. He hesitated, then slowly backed away, his eyes locked on the darkness. The shadow grew, stretching toward them like a living thing. The little girl buried her face in her mother's chest, trembling. Then the footage glitched, jumping forward a few seconds. The man was gone. The woman and child sat frozen on the couch, wide-eyed. The hallway was empty again. The camera shook slightly, as if whoever was holding it was trembling. The whispering had stopped. The woman called out the man's name. Silence. She stood up, holding her daughter close, and cautiously moved toward the hallway. The girl clung to her, her small hands gripping her mother's dress. As they neared the darkened hall, the screen flickered again, and for the briefest moment I thought I saw something. Something tall, impossibly thin, standing just at the edge of the frame, barely distinguishable from the darkness. Then the screen cut to static. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the flickering screen. I rewound the tape, trying to catch another glimpse of that thing in the hallway, but every time I paused or slowed the footage, it was like it wasn't there at all. Just static and darkness. I ejected the tape and sat back, my mind racing. The strangest thing was that living room. The more I thought about it, the more familiar it seemed. My hands felt clammy as I glanced around my own living room. The fireplace, the coffee table, the hallway leading to my bedroom. I turned back to the tape, staring at the VHS sitting on my coffee table. My living room wasn't just similar, it was identical. A cold chill ran down my spine. The furniture in the video was older, the decor a little different, but it was undeniably my house. My stomach twisted as I remembered the way the tape ended, the man vanishing, the woman and child creeping toward the hallway. I never saw what happened to them. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made my pulse spike. I kept glancing at my hallway, half expecting to see something shifting in the shadows. The next morning, I decided to do some digging. I searched public records, old news archives, anything I could find about the house, and I found it. 32 years ago, a family lived here, a couple and their young daughter. One night, the father went missing. No forced entry, no sign of struggle. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. The mother and child moved away soon after, leaving the house abandoned for years before it was eventually sold to another family. I sat back in my chair, my blood running cold. The tape wasn't just some random home video. It was a recording of that night, a record of the moment he disappeared. I locked the VHS away in a box and shoved it deep into my closet, trying to forget it. But some nights, when the house is silent, I swear I hear it. The low hum of static, the faint murmur of whispers seeping from the darkness of the hallway. And when I wake up, the closet door is always open. Estate sales had always intrigued me. There was something haunting yet fascinating about stepping into a stranger's home, sifting through remnants of their life, and finding something that spoke to me. The idea that objects carried history made every purchase feel like a small mystery waiting to be unraveled. One rainy Saturday morning, I decided to visit an estate sale in an older part of town. The house was a towering Victorian, its once pristine white paint now dulled with age. A rusted iron gate creaked as I pushed it open, stepping onto the overgrown path leading to the entrance. There were only a few people browsing, giving the sale an eerily quiet atmosphere. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of aged wood. The furniture was ornate, the walls lined with faded portraits of solemn-looking people. I wandered from room to room, scanning for anything that caught my eye. Then, in the dimly lit study, I saw it. A painting propped against the wall, half covered by an old sheet. It was a portrait of a woman in a black dress, her eyes dark and piercing. Something about her expression unsettled me. It wasn't quite sorrow, nor was it anger. It was as if she was watching. The artist had captured something unnervingly lifelike, a presence that made it hard to look away. An older man, presumably the estate handler, noticed me staring. "You interested in that?" he asked. "Maybe," I said hesitantly. "Who is she?" He gave a small shrug. "No one knows. The painting came with the house. The owner never touched it, claimed it gave him the creeps. Figured someone might want it for the frame. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to take it home. Maybe it was the sheer artistry, or maybe I wanted to prove to myself that it was just a painting. I bought it for next to nothing and carefully loaded it into my car, ignoring the gnawing discomfort in my chest. Back home, I decided to hang it in my hallway, just above a side table. The moment it was on the wall, my apartment felt different, heavier, like the air had thickened somehow. That night, as I sat on my couch reading, I kept glancing toward the hallway. Though I couldn't see the painting directly from where I sat, I felt it, the weight of its presence pressing into the back of my mind. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke up to the sound of a soft creak. My apartment was still, the only light coming from the dim glow of a street lamp outside. Then another creak. Closer this time. I held my breath, listening. My eyes darted toward the hallway. My heart lurched. The painting, it was slightly tilted. I knew I had centered it perfectly, and yet, now it hung at an angle, as if something had shifted it. Swallowing my unease, I walked over and adjusted it back into place. Maybe the nail was loose. Maybe I'd knocked into the wall without realizing it. That had to be it. But as I turned away, a chill ran down my spine. The woman's expression. Had it changed? I shook off the thought and went to bed, though sleep didn't come easy. I dreamt of whispering voices, of soft footsteps pacing outside my bedroom door. And when I woke up, my throat was dry, my body stiff like I hadn't moved all night. For the next few days, strange things kept happening. Objects weren't where I had left them. The TV turned on by itself in the middle of the night, static hissing through the darkness, and always the feeling of being watched. One evening, as I was locking up for the night, I passed the hallway and stopped cold. The painting, it was on the floor, face down. My pulse pounded in my ears as I slowly bent down to pick it up. The frame wasn't broken. There was no sign that it had simply fallen. It was as if something had taken it down. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to get rid of it. That night I carried the painting outside and left it by the dumpster. But as I turned to head back inside, the streetlight above flickered out, plunging the alley into darkness. A wave of unease crashed over me. I rushed inside, locked the door, and tried to shake the feeling that I had made a mistake. The next morning I left for work early, trying to push the whole thing from my mind. But as I pulled into my driveway that evening, my stomach dropped. The painting, it was leaning against my front door. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone I had thrown it out. I hadn't seen anyone near the dumpster when I left it there. So how? A slow, creeping dread coiled around me as I stood frozen in place. The woman in the painting stared back at me, her expression unreadable, yet somehow satisfied. I didn't take it inside. I drove straight to the nearest wooded area, walked deep into the trees, and buried it beneath a pile of heavy rocks. I never saw it again. But some nights when the house is still and the air feels thick, I swear I hear a faint creak, like a frame shifting against a wall. And sometimes I wake up with the feeling that someone is watching me, even when I'm alone. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when I decided to take a break from my usual routine. My job as a lawyer is often stressful, full of back-to-back meetings, long hours, and difficult clients. So when I spotted a small neighborhood yard sale while driving home, I decided to pull over. I figured it would be a nice distraction, a quick escape from the pressures of work. The sale was held in front of a modest house on a quiet street. The owner, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, waved me over as I walked up the driveway. The table was cluttered with all kinds of items: books, old kitchenware, vintage clothes. Nothing too remarkable at first glance, but something about the clutter piqued my interest. I liked the idea of finding something old, something with a story behind it. I started digging through a box of assorted knickknacks when a small wooden box caught my eye. It was simple but intricately carved, like something you'd find in an antique store. The box was old, scratched and worn, but still beautiful in its own way. It reminded me of the kind of thing my grandmother might have kept her keepsakes in. "How much for this?" I asked, holding it up to the woman. She looked at the box for a moment, then shrugged. $5. I didn't hesitate. I handed her the cash and carried the box to my car, feeling a strange satisfaction at the find. It wasn't much, but it was a piece of history, something that felt personal, something that felt special. When I got home, I set the box on my kitchen counter and went about my evening. The box sat there untouched as I ate dinner and watched TV. But as the night wore on, I started to get a strange feeling. It was almost like the box was watching me. I shook it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But I couldn't deny the unease that seemed to grow as I looked at it. After a while, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the box. Inside, there was a faded photograph, a small scrap of paper, and a set of keys. The photograph was of an old house, one that looked strangely familiar, like something I had seen in my neighborhood. The paper was a handwritten note, though it was too faded to read clearly. The keys, however, seemed to be the most significant. They looked like they belonged to something important. I stared at them for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. The photo seemed like it was taken decades ago, but the house in the image, those red brick walls, the worn steps, looked like it could have been taken yesterday. I felt an odd tug in my chest, but pushed the feeling aside. It was probably just a coincidence. That night, I locked the box away in a drawer and tried to forget about it. But the next few days felt off. I kept seeing glimpses of that old house in my mind, the keys, the photograph. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all connected somehow, like I was being drawn to something or someone. I didn't understand. Then, a week later, I was walking home from the store when I noticed something strange. As I passed a house a few blocks down, I saw a man standing in front of it, staring at me. He didn't move, just watched me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. I tried to brush it off as coincidence, but something about the way he looked at me stuck with me. That night, I dreamed of the house. I was standing outside it, staring at the door. The keys from the box were in my hand, and as I approached, I could hear faint voices from inside. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. It felt so real, too real. The next day, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head. As I passed the house again, I noticed the man from the night before. He was still standing there, only this time, he was watching me from the shadows of the porch. I tried to ignore him and keep walking, but my pace quickened. That night, I couldn't resist. I took the keys from the box and drove to the house. My heart raced as I parked down the street, hidden from view. The house was eerily quiet. The windows were dark, but something about the place seemed alive. I walked up to the front door, the keys cold in my hand. As I turned the key in the lock, I felt a strange sensation, like the air itself was thickening. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The house was empty, dusty, abandoned, but it felt as though someone had just left. There were no signs of recent life, no belongings, but the silence in the air was deafening. I explored the rooms, each one darker and more oppressive than the last. The place felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. I found myself drawn to the basement door, the wooden stairs leading down into darkness. The keys in my pocket jangled as I approached, and my hand trembled as I grabbed the handle. The door opened with a low groan, revealing a staircase that descended into pitch black. I don't know why, but I had to go down there. I took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness, the air cool and damp against my skin. As I reached the bottom, I felt a sudden sense of dread wash over me. The space was small, cluttered with old furniture and boxes, but there was something else. Something wrong. In the far corner, I saw a small wooden chest. It looked almost identical to the one from the yard sale. My heart skipped a beat as I approached it. The chest creaked open with a horrible screech, and inside was a collection of items, photos, scraps of paper, a set of keys. The same keys I had, the same house, the same man. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the collection of things. It wasn't just coincidence. Somehow I had been drawn here, to this place, to this moment. The man wasn't just a stranger. He was the keeper of this house, the guardian of whatever was hidden in its walls. I turned to leave, but as I did, I heard footsteps behind me. Slowly, I turned around, and there he was, the man from the street, standing in the doorway. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice cold and filled with something I couldn't name. I backed away, my heart racing. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out. "I want you to leave," he said. "You shouldn't have found it. But now that you have, you can't leave. You belong here." I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, slamming the door behind me. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what had just happened. The keys, the photographs, the house. It wasn't a random discovery. It was all connected, and somehow I had walked right into it. That night I locked every door, checked every window. The house felt different now, less like home and more like a prison. But I knew deep down, it wasn't over. The man would come for me. They always come for those who find the truth. And now I had no idea how to escape. I've always been drawn to the idea of bringing old things back to life. I can't help it. Vintage furniture, antique pieces, old paintings. There's something about them that feels rich with history, as if they've seen more than any modern item ever could. It's almost like they have stories to tell, secrets to reveal. But I didn't always know how dangerous that allure could be. It started when I stumbled across an estate sale one rainy Saturday afternoon. The sky was gray and the streets were slick with moisture, making everything look a little softer, a little more distant. I wasn't even supposed to be there, really. I had been out running errands, but something about the weather drew me in. The house itself was old, a sprawling two-story affair that seemed to sag under the weight of time. I could already tell it had been lived in for decades, its windows foggy and cracked in places, the once pristine garden now overgrown with ivy and weeds. I don't know why I walked in. It wasn't even advertised, no sign or banner to grab attention, but I went anyway. Inside, it smelled like dust and old paper, the kind of smell you find in libraries that haven't been touched in years. The place was cluttered with furniture and paintings, little knickknacks scattered around, each one holding a quiet story of its own. I wandered through the rooms, running my fingers over the surfaces of old tables and chairs, brushing past tarnished silverware and chipped porcelain. Then, in the corner of the dining room, I saw it. A dark wooden chest. Its surface was worn, the wood smooth in places from years of hands running over it, and carved with intricate patterns. It had the kind of charm you only find in something that's been cared for by generations. I walked up to it, drawn like a magnet. Something about it felt important. It wasn't large, about the size of a coffee table, but it seemed like it carried weight. It was closed, locked, and had an ornate keyhole. It looked like the kind of thing that hid treasures, secrets, or maybe memories of someone long gone. "How much for the chest?" I asked, turning to the woman who had been quietly organizing things in the other room. She didn't look up at first, just continued moving items around as if she hadn't heard me. $50, she mumbled, her voice faint but sharp. I hesitated. $50 seemed like a lot for something that was just sitting there, gathering dust. But then her eyes met mine. There was something off about her gaze. It wasn't cold or angry, but it wasn't warm either. There was an intensity in it, something I couldn't quite place. "I'll take it," I said without another thought. She didn't speak as I handed her the cash. She simply nodded, took the money, and walked away, leaving me to load the chest into my car. As I did, I glanced back at the house. The windows seemed to watch me as I left, but that could have just been my imagination. After all, it was just an old house. I didn't think much about it as I drove home. I was excited about my new purchase. The chest would be a perfect addition to my living room. I could already picture it sitting by the fireplace, a nice accent to the cozy space I had been trying to make my own. Once home, I set the chest in front of the fireplace, taking in the way the warm wood looked against the stone hearth. The fire crackled beside it, sending small pops and crackles into the room. I could already imagine what I would keep inside, maybe some old letters, trinkets I didn't know what to do with, or maybe just my favorite books. But when I went to open it, I realized it was locked. The lock was delicate but sturdy, and the key wasn't with it. I tried the handle anyway, as if it could somehow open without the key. It didn't. I shrugged and left it there for the night. That evening, I sat down on the couch with a book, the fire flickering beside me. The chest remained a quiet presence in the room, its smooth surface glowing in the light. But as I settled deeper into the couch, I felt something strange, a chill. It wasn't from the fire, it wasn't cold enough for that. No, it was a coldness that seemed to come from the chest itself. I tried to ignore it, but the longer I sat there, the more it grew. The air felt heavier. The crackling of the fire seemed distant, drowned out by a low hum in the background. It was like a sound just on the edge of hearing, faint, almost imperceptible. I stood up, feeling uneasy. It was just the silence of the house, I told myself, nothing more. But then I heard it, a soft tapping, like fingers lightly brushing against the top of the chest. I froze, my heart thudding loudly in my chest. I stood still, waiting, but the tapping didn't stop. It wasn't coming from inside the chest. No, it was coming from the lid itself, as if someone were gently, carefully knocking from the inside. I walked toward it slowly, each step feeling like a decision I wasn't sure I wanted to make. The closer I got, the louder the tapping became. I reached out, my hand trembling as I placed it against the chest. The tapping stopped, just like that. I don't know what possessed me to open it, but I did. When the lid creaked up, it wasn't the rush of old wood against its frame that made me recoil. It was the smell. It was sickly sweet, like something rotting, yet oddly floral. I gagged and stepped back, trying to wave the smell away, but it lingered, filling my nose, my throat. Inside the chest, there was nothing but dust, a few strands of old, brittle fabric, and what looked like a single curled-up letter. My hand hesitated over it, but something made me pull it out anyway. It was old, its paper yellowed with age, and the ink had faded in some spots, but I could still make out the words. "Don't open it. Don't open it. It will come for you." I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't just the words. It was the sheer terror that seemed to drip off them, the urgency of the message. The letter felt like it was warning me, pleading with me. I slammed the lid shut, my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that I had made a terrible mistake. Something had been in that chest, something dark, something waiting. That night, the dreams started. They were vivid, filled with images of shadows creeping through my house, growing in size until they reached my chest, knocking softly, always knocking. When I woke up, I'd find myself sweating, my sheets tangled around me, heart racing as if I had just run a marathon. The whispers began shortly after. Soft at first, just a word here and there. But soon they became more distinct. They were always just out of reach, like they were coming from the other side of a door I couldn't open. At night, I would hear them coming from the chest, as if it were calling me. "Let me out." I told myself I was just tired, that I had imagined it. But as the weeks passed, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. And then, one evening, as I sat on the couch, I felt it. A hand, cold and damp, pressed against my back. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there, nothing but the empty room. And yet I knew. It was there. The presence, watching. I couldn't take it anymore. The chest had to go. But when I tried to move it, I found it impossibly heavy. It was as if it had fused with the floor, as if it had become a part of the house itself. That's when I heard the voice again, only this time it wasn't a whisper. It was clear, forceful. "Open it," I screamed, backing away from the chest as it seemed to shift on its own, moving slightly toward me, like it was hungry for something. I ran. I didn't look back. I left the house, the chest still sitting in the living room, as if waiting for me to return. I haven't been back since. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house is quiet, I can still hear it, the soft tapping, like fingers against wood. A low hum in the distance, waiting for me to come back, and I know, deep down, it's still waiting. It's always waiting.